This might be the first time they've seen something like this. This is called a map. Now, I want you to tell me how the fuck you get here. As an American, how do you get to this city? Right here. How do you even get to that dot? Not let alone the block that it's on. How do you get there? How do you put forces on the ground?
This is the U.S. intelligence agency, Mind Control.
Howdy.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing great. How are y'all doing?
Doing pretty
Doing
good,
all right.
man.
Yeah,
Thanks
doing
for all right. Taking the time to chat with us.
Oh, the pleasure is mine. Well, I think didn't I say I wanted to talk to you guys a while back? I was playing Banjo-Kazooie and somebody linked me a video.
Yeah, no, I
saw
do
you were
remember
live.
that, Vaush.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Actually, I remember at the time we were down to discuss, but we had a guest that was like all queued up, ready to go, and it was kind of an important conversation. You know, not just the typical drama mongering that we typically do. So we wanted to get to that, but you know, we're glad to finally engage with you. Obviously, we were telling the audience that we've made a lot of content reviewing your various takes, and you know, we have given you credit in the past where we agree, but obviously there's been a lot of times too where we disagree, and I think that foreign policy is, you know, clearly one of those points of disagreement between myself and Zach.
Foreign policy experts of these ones, right?
All of them.
And you,
very
Vaush,
much
so
foreign
I think this is
policy
a really
experts.
good context to have this debate. I know you put out a video responding to Zach and I's reaction to your take on drones, and I think there's a little bit of confusion about that off the
Maybe
bat.
a bit.
So
The direct convos are always better. I know how things get
I just want to see the date on this, right? Because 1 year ago, okay, Ukraine is still relevant.
it's not just about confusion either. It's about tone. You know, people are always going to be more charitable when you're speaking directly to someone. No, I'm happy to be talking to you guys. You know, I actually just came off the cusp of having a convo with somebody who was in favor of the sentiment of the Iraq War. So I'm actually all primed for the foreign
now
policy.
I'm looking
talks.
at them.
oh god, yeah, I
So
hope
they
that we're a
flipped my
little bit
camera.
more reasonable than whoever that was. I don't know how you could possibly defend the
I'm sure
Iraq
you guys
war.
are pro-Iraq war too. You know, we're all reasonable people here.
Well, it's a good segue, Vaush, because you know the video that we reacted to, that in turn you reacted to of ours, had to do a little bit with the drone war, and just the war on terror in general in the post 9/11 era, and we agreement with. And I can play it if you want, just in case you like want to deny that you said this or whatever. But
All right.
what
Goals here? If you're having a debate on the drone war, and the first thing, like if I was a debate host and I want, like seeing if everyone had their credentials here, I would just ask, what is Waziristan? And if nobody was able to answer that, then I would be like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. Please come back when you actually have proper information on this subject.
That's one way to do it.
I mean, am I not correct though?
Yeah.
Like I can accept, like Fatah, that might be a little harder to resender, but Waziristan, I think it stands out so much to know, like, oh, that's where all the drone strikes happen. That's the drone strike capital, right? Just ingrain that in people so they know exactly where we're talking about.
Where you're talking about, yeah.
Because it's Yemen is bad too, but like nothing compares to Waziristan and how many fucking bombs were dropped there by drones all the time. All of them really fucking illegal too.
What you said that I really took issue with was we have a solid justification for engaging in drone strikes in Afghanistan to this day. That was the real meat of the issue where I disagreed with you. I think that even when it comes to killing al-qeada leader, someone that was responsible for 9/11, I still don't think that justifies.
He was not.
Our drone war policy. And in fact, I think it feeds into the exact, State Department logic that ends up justifying the drone war in the first place, which obviously kills indiscriminate hundreds of thousands of civilians, far more, by the way, that were killed in 9/11 in the first place. So generally, I just don't think that the extrajudicial assassinations via drone are acceptable under basically any circumstance. And that was the gist of my beef with your take.
The thing about comparing it to 9/11 is 9/11 is specifically attack against civilians. It's also known as strategic bombing. You know this. Strategic bombing means we bomb civilian. We're currently bombing a school. We're strategically bombing a school. So that doesn't happen. Like, that was a World War II thing. That's why the atomic bomb made sense in World War II, because they believed that Russia still believes strategic bombing works. Now, you look at Hitler's quotes about it. He doesn't care how many German lives are lost, because without the existence of Nazism, everything is lost. Megalomaniac. So has America specifically, look at the WikiLeaks collateral murder video. Like, has America specifically killed civilians and only civilians in strikes and things like that? Yeah, but have they had like a planned order from the top operation to go in and like My Lai massacre a village in Iraq? Not that we know of, but someday maybe a Freedom of Information Act will leak or something, and it'll be like a secret thing that happened. We did a lot of fucked up stuff with the KPF in Waziristan, so that's part of it too.
The drones were pretty devastating.
Mm-hmm. To civilians specifically in Waziristan.
Mm-hmm.
Sides to this. There's the drone side and the extrajudicial execution side. Drones are here to stay whether we like it or not, because they're just the next step in warfare. They're going to be adopted eventually by every country that can afford them. Why would anyone ever risk committing a pilot, all the training and the cost of a plane, to make these hits or whatever? So drones are here to stay. It's their application that people are concerned with. And when it comes to the extrajudicial assassinations, I guess the main issue that I have is that these days terrorism is capable.
I appreciate them using the correct terminology.
And so international. And I don't really know what the best mechanism would be for retaliation against terrorist groups outside of stuff like this. It feels like drones make it about as good as can be, all things considered, right? You wouldn't want to do another invasion of Afghanistan every time a former al-qeada leader popped up. That'd be kind of bad.
Wild thing to say. To talk about how you're like anti-drone war and be like, I'd rather have a drone war than people who are actually on the ground getting intelligence, tracking targets, knowing where bombs are going. Rather have that than like actual accurate intel. That's why Yemen was so bad. There was no reliable operators on the ground. Who's there? We have a few special operators, and like especially in like Obama era, like they invested so much into the special operations. It just made them almost less effective because they were using them as a solution for everything. A world where the United States is just drone striking around the world, just random targets from the sky, is literally what these people just advocated for.
Good.
And I want to ask genuinely, I really want to know your opinion, because you mentioned on the live stream, or your reaction live stream yesterday to us, when we made this point about the extrajudicial assassination, you're like, what, are we just supposed to go arrest him? And I genuinely want to know, why do you not think that's a possibility? Like, if we have the ability to wage
he's in a fucking Haqqani network house, dude. What the fuck do you mean? Why can't we just go arrest him? We've known where Haqqani was for a long time, right? Why don't we just go in and arrest Sirajuddin Haqqani? Go right to his office and go in there and be like, hey, Buster, you're under arrest. I'm sure it will go well. And also, like, they have no idea. Like, they think we can just suddenly, like, drop in, like, a UFO from above and, like, be at the location that they need to be with no logistical planning or whatever.
Militaristic efforts that we do abroad, and we have the ability to occupy countries. Do you really think it would, like, be impossible for us to send a team of, CIA agents or whatever the hell to go apprehend this guy so we could, give him a trial by jury, and we don't have to sacrifice the, a very intrinsically American value of him?
Like, the source that I use to quote the Iraq War is the guy who runs the database for it, who like he can, it's confirmed. Like, he knows every confirmed, like, and they're tracked, and it's got a database, and it'll show you who they are. It'll tell you like everything about every single like person that died in the Iraq War. It'll tell you about them. Right.
What the fuck?
Depending on how much data he can find.
Yeah.
It's some, I forgot what the name of the thing is, but like I'll use their number because it's the most accurate number.
What's their number?
Oh, it's just like up to, they have an estimated number as well. They have like based on data. It's like up to 300,000, I believe.
Yeah.
Habeas corpus in the process, the logic of which has led to the atrocities at Guantanamo Bay and all of these other war crimes committed in the name of anti-terrorism.
We could have just killed him.
Could have.
That's what the protocol was before. Extraordinary rendition pretty much got invented. Not really, because technically we did it to Carlos the Jackal.
Well, I I think that in the context of warfare, which I think is kind of the attitude certainly we take with al-Qaeda, the Taliban, whatever, I don't think that the habeas corpus attitude is necessarily maintained. You know, obviously we can't put on trial every soldier we encounter. We could send people to arrest, but
this is why, guys, remember, even if it was a kangaroo court, we gave Saddam to Iraq for them to try and decide his punishment. We gave them to the country to go through their legal system, which is what we actually do a lot with, like, when we arrest a lot of these people. That's why a lot of Taliban were tortured to death by what's that warlord's name that rapes people all the time?
Can't help you.
Dashtam. He's like the most evil guy in Afghanistan for real. He worked with the Soviets, right? When the Soviets were falling, betrayed them, started working for Hikmatyar. Hikmatyar started losing to Massoud, betrayed Hikmatyar, started working with Massoud. The only people he hasn't worked with is the Taliban because they hate him. Because he's worked for every single one of their enemies, right? So he's like, he's one of the most violent, ruthless people. He was vice president for the first Ashraf Ghani term, right? Because he has that much power as a warlord. Violent man. And he, like, there's this whole thing with an incident where like 200 people were stuffed into a shipping container because he put them in like a shipping container, sent it to like his private prison, and they died before they got there in the heat or something like that.
Interesting.
And there's just so much accounts of torture through his prisons, Ashraf Ghani as well, his prisons as well. But it's not our, like, you didn't want us to have black sites anyway, so the black sites got closed down. We gave them to Afghanistan, and they decided what to do with it. Now, as far as that goes, like I said, there's no way that Haqqani didn't know that guy was there. So he's either implicated on him turning him over his location to the Americans, or he's not.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't that be worse? I mean, if you wanted to send in SEAL Team 6 every time you wanted to bring in some former terrorist leader, first of all, people are going to die because they're all holed up in compounds. You know, we send folks in with guns. More people will die that way without trial. You know, guards, whatever. Than you get with a drone strike. If you
not only did he have bodyguards on him, he had, and we know this from a Pakistani reporter, Belial Shamway, I think, but they spot 4 cars leaving the area and never to return with their whole families and belongings immediately after that drone strike. They're all Egyptians, all 4 of them. So they're in houses around that compound as well. So if a team went in, even if they got to that location, they're not getting out.
Managed to get them alive, which is not a guarantee, by the way, especially with some of the more,
also, dude had his whole family there. Are his family guilty of his crimes? Some really radical people will say, yes, they're complacent in him. They knew what was going on. They support it. But no, they're not. So, unlike bin Laden, where we killed multiple generations of his family to get him, this guy was just like, slap chop.
Suicide.
2 slap chops. They dropped 2 on him, by the way.
How gung-ho they are with their own.
They made sure they hit.
And you would also have to commit troops to the ground, which is like, I don't know. I feel like internationally, people would think a lot less of the idea of like a Navy ship with SEALs coming out, like the whole process of extraditing somebody, killing their guards, bringing them to the U.S.
I hear a lot of what you're saying, right? Obviously, there's a net benefit for the United States and our ambitions globally if we are able to, instead of sending our soldiers over somewhere to, as you mentioned, not only die but to kill the protectorates or the guards of any of these terrorist leaders that we're after. However, I think it just comes back down to what I would consider to be, sort of a matter of principle for how we're going to conduct ourselves internationally. And I think that if I'm not ready to concede that, we're just going to accept the death toll from, this international military industrial complex that makes a massive trove of money off of these civilian drone deaths. And I think that, of course, we have to. Okay, if I can just finish this one point really quickly, I just want to say that I think that obviously right now with the system that we have laid out, all of the arguments that you're
now, this if they end up watching this might be the first time they've seen something like this. This is called a map. Now, I want you to tell me how the fuck you get here as an American. How do you get to this city? Right here. How do you even get to that dot? Not let alone the block that it's on. How do you get there? How do you put forces on the ground? Like, even like in the invasion, they could use airstrikes, right, from ships out in the sea down below Balochistan, right? But like this is all mountains as well. You see how dense the mountains are?
Yeah.
There's only like a few ways to get into Afghanistan. All this region right here to get into Afghanistan, from the easiest side to get into, from like from Jalalabad over here.
Yeah.
All of this is controlled by the Haqqanis. All of this. So you can't go that way because he's staying in a Haqqani house. So unless like Haqqani and his entire family is implemented in it, which would be crazy. Like they might be able to buy off like Siraj Dean because they've made deals in the past, but that Kandahar, you can try to drive all the way up from the Taliban's main base in Kandahar. You can try to drive all the way up to Kabul, right? If you could insert over into Balochistan and move up into Kandahar, all right?
It's just such an insane plan.
Iran to go to Herat, right? And then what? There's like not even complete roads. The way that the Russians came in is they come through here through the top.
Up the top, yeah.
Yeah, there's a little highway that goes down here. And that's where Kunduz is. Kunduz is where they have all these international meetings with ISIS and shit.
Aren't all the Tajiks up there too?
Yeah, well, they're up in these mountains. So the resistance forces will go back into Uzbekistan and Tajikistan right here.
Yeah.
But they're all over the place. I mean, there's plenty. It's not like everyone is loyal to the Taliban. I mean, think about how many, if they're really like doing this shit to opium that they claim they are, which they're not. I've seen videos of opium production, plenty of. But they're certainly affecting the price of it. So there's got to be a lot of opium lords pretty pissed off. And also, like, want to know something funny about Guladdin Hekmatyar, who's like Haqqani's opium rival, for anyone who doesn't know? The dude learned to code because he hated the Taliban so much. Like I don't know. It's just in his book, and we were laughing about it because it says that he learned how to code to like create websites and stuff like that.
That's so funny.
I mean, come on. It's just so unrealistic, especially when we're talking about. You can make hypothetical arguments like, oh, but you know, if it could be somewhere else, blah blah blah. We used Delta to fucking kill the leader of Daesh under Trump, didn't we? We used a drone to kill. We used not even the slap chop. We used a fucking type Predator drone too, dropped on Qasem Soleimani. The CIA is now slap chopping ISIS leaders all the time. There is no other way to kill that guy in the center of Afghanistan than with the CIA. Only they can drop these, right? It's not. It's like it's such a. I mean, Obama was doing the baseball card thing, which was so fucked. But like these drones have to get into Afghanistan undetected. Isn't exactly, you know, they may not have a lot of like anti-radar tech or anything like that, but it's still pretty hard to do because where do you launch from?
Yeah. Exactly.
And then if you're launching them from somewhere where Iran or Pakistan can see, guess who they're going to tell?
You're saying they make sense. But I think from my perspective and the perspective that Gavin and I are trying to unfold here as, you know, people who view themselves as like staunchly anti-war in basically every circumstance that, and that's not to say that I'm here to like fucking
staunchly anti-war. We should have invaded Afghanistan again to kill this one guy in the center of Kabul. This is what I mean by I'm more anti-war than you.
Yeah.
Longer put our lives in favor of the money for Boeing, that we will no longer put our lives in favor of the money for Raytheon. And if we don't do that, then we are just saying that, okay, we're going to let business be run as usual. And as you said, Vaush, then the drone war will be here to stay. But I'm just wondering,
do you think Raytheon, Jack, you tell me, do you think most of Raytheon's money comes from American taxpayers or other countries' GDP?
Oh, no, they're
or do they
company,
come from
governments.
Other governments' GDPs?
Yeah, it's the entire global.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts on an effort to eradicate a drone war, to upend a military?
Don't use words like eradicate, ever, when talking about warfare in general.
Industrial complex, even if you think that it's politically untenable.
Yeah, there was a lot loaded in there. I'm a huge advocate for reducing our military expenditures and retracting our position as like world police officers. What I'm saying right now with regards to like the
keep in mind, like while that sounds like an obvious practical solution, and it generally is, if we're talking about the military industrial complex, the demand that these countries have for the American troops to secure stuff that are in America's interest, like they only fight for America's interests. Let's be clear on that one first. So they're only there for America's interest, but if they coincide with the country's interest, then you have a deal.
Mm.
So if we're having less people join, which is just going to happen, the military is going to have to withdraw from certain places, right? Which is fine. Who then fills that demand that those countries have? And this is the whole argument where they talk about, well, Saudi Arabia would go buy planes from Russia. Fuck off. No, they wouldn't. They know how good our bombs are. They don't want Russian weapons. Turkey tries to play that game, but
Yeah.
it would be the American weapons companies selling these leaders like, oh, all you need is this jumbo tank, It's mine-resistant vehicle. That's all you need. Just buy this and your soldiers won't even be hurt. Training is probably something, especially how we're looking at how it works in the Ukraine war, that's probably going to be something that's more marketed from a lot of these PMCs and stuff, specifically to do training tasks.
Drone striking of terrorist leaders, I would apply to any country that can get away with it. So England doesn't have 800 military bases across the world, or India or whatever. But if there was the reason I think Afghanistan is special is because it's essentially a terrorist state. I mean, it basically is now with the Taliban in charge, meaning diplomacy isn't really on the table. It's just not a mechanism that's viable there. If it was possible to extradite people, if Afghanistan was cooperative to the point where we could be like,
Vaush, like I said, I don't believe for a second that Haqqani did not know about this strike. Now, when we went into Afghanistan, everyone says, oh, they could have negotiated harder with Omar and Osama, right? But Haqqani and then the generals from Pakistan were like, nah, Omar, fuck these guys. Omar knew that he went to go be sheltered by Haqqani. Omar said, all right, I'm not going to kick you out, but you have to go up here. It was a compromise because Omar needed to save face because it's against Pashtunwali to deny bin Laden shelter from his enemies like that, right? And that's the whole the lone survivor story. He gets taken in by a guy who won't turn him over to the Taliban because it would wreck his reputation in his village to violate Pashtunwali or Pashtunwali. It means the same thing, Pashtun and Pashtun. It's just a different dialect. So keep that in mind when we're talking about this would be the Taliban who are trying to cash in like they're victorious over America right now, admitting to everyone that they're working with the Americans and helped them kill the leader of al-Qaeda. That is just an insane thing to expect Afghanistan to do. And it would only bring about, as much as I hate the fucking Taliban, that would bring so much more instability. It would radicalize everyone against the Taliban, and it would lead us to the fucking situation like 1992 again.
Hey, we'll give you guys, I don't know, what do you want? Billions, just we'll give you something. Can you give us the al-Qaeda person? Great. I think that'd be lovely. It would be
They would have paid him. There's no way he didn't get $5 million for that hit. They definitely paid him $5 million for it. I'm confident of it.
Great sign of trust. The Afghanistan situation as it stands right now is a lot more complicated, and it seems like there's a greater pretext for just sort of a free-for-all Fortnite match over who gets to murk the al-Qaeda leaders first. When it comes to the drone war stuff, drones are here to stay. They're just an advancement technologically in terms of the means of killing people at a distance. It's how we use them that really, really matters. I am happy that the U.S. military-industrial complex has made an effort to make drones and their strikes less likely to kill civilians with that ninja missile shit they're doing. Yeah. I think that's a good step. Because ideally, you wouldn't want to kill any civilians. Many civilians are going to die as a product of any military action. The goal would be to reduce that as much as possible. And I guess it would be a trade-off. What level of civilian deaths are you willing to accept as a trade-off for any successful military action? We have to consider this with anything. World War II, the invasion of the Pacific. I mean, any military action entails with it a threat. Drones have a uniquely low likelihood of civilian deaths relative to other mechanisms. Obviously, ground war is going to harm a lot more.
Not how we were using drones in the drone war, which is what this argument is about. It's because that's over. It's not about the modern drone tech. The arguments they're trying to have. Drones were, it's debatable how effective they were. I mean, how else were we going to kill Haqqani family members in Waziristan without drones? Strap fucking satchel charges to the KPF and send them in there multi-month missions to slowly creep up on a Haqqani house. They'll definitely get them while the meeting's still there. What could go wrong?
more civilians if you're trying to kill like one guy on the ground. Like a drone's a way more effective way of doing it.
Fair.
So all this stuff's really complicated. I don't have any like hard jingoistic answers for stuff like this, because part of it is like the inevitable material advancement of means of warfare, and part of it is like the cultural place that America operates on at the world stage.
Well,
there's an intersection there that's really, really tough.
So it's like, if the drone war was effective, they would still be doing it, right? Not necessarily. Depleted uranium is perfectly effective. But because of the ghost of Saddam Hussein, people think that it's like, that's why everyone in Fallujah died, right?
Yeah.
So they got rid of depleted uranium because people were like, they're using toxic bullets. It was a bad reputation for the U.S. That's why they stopped. So even if the drone war was effective, U.S. cares way more about how they look to the world. And that's where you have advantage in turning to the U.S. is you're more likely to see human rights be upheld.
Well, let's talk about the cultural place where America stands in the world right now, because you're saying that Afghanistan is a terrorist state. And while I might agree with you, I think from the perspective of the Afghani people, or, you know, a lot of other
it's technically not a state even at this point.
Middle Eastern people in general, we would be a terrorist state. As I mentioned,
our
drone strikes and airstrikes have killed over 50.
All right. Southern Iraq. Yeah, they'll tell you that. There's a lot of people in southern Lebanon that will tell you that. Pretty much anyone outside of northern Syria will tell you that. And there's this attitude that this whole like, oh yeah, fuck America attitude, because the governments don't want to look like client states, which as much as Hassan was throwing the client state thing around, America helped everyone out in that region by killing Saddam Hussein. I mean, technically the Iraqis killed him. Everyone hated him. It was then all these governments took the terrorists that were in their countries and put them in Iraq, solving that problem for them too. Gaddafi, everyone hated him. It was good for the other governments there that he died.
1,000 people since 9/11, which killed 3,000 people. Again, that's civilian murders carried out by the United States. So according to your logic, and I brought this up in our video, you mostly laughed it off, but do you really want to live
civilian murder? There was civilian murders. There's a famous one where they like there was like this like 4 Marines or something. They like broke into like an Iraqi girl's house, like an 8-year-old that they had been watching, and like had like all this like pedophilic lust for her, right? Killed the family, like broke the mom's arms, burnt the remains, made sure they used AKs because they thought like, hey, if we use AKs, they can't trace the bullets back to us. Went and got chicken wings after like raping and killing an entire family. All those guys went on trial for murder. That's a civilian murder. All right. What's his ass in Australia? BRS?
Ben Robert Smith.
BRS. Old Leggy himself is a murderer. Who's that one guy we make fun of? Michael. Michael Jan World is a murderer. You know, not everyone in the military is a murderer, especially because we statistically know that most people don't fire to kill in war. Typically are just shooting their gun, and it gets higher when they're conscripts.
Live in the world where al-Qaeda is, you know, okay to drone our leaders, drone George Bush, Barack Obama, Joe Biden. If the logic you're extending to their drone strikes applies, then, you know, do you really want to live in a world where every country is just drone?
Do you guys not? Al-Qaeda does more damage to other countries than the US, which in turn affects US interest because of capitalism, guys. So these governments, like in Africa right now, they're like dealing with a whole insurgency and it's causing all these coups. Remember how that's happening? And it's crazy because of like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, which were largely accelerated by the war on terror. There's where your criticism should be, is that's how we're destabilizing countries, is that the tactics that we used encouraged terrorists. It radicalized them. And they are now attacking their own governments. And it's only going to get worse with climate change.
When striking their adversary, I think that's not really an ideal geopolitical situation that anyone would want to operate in, especially not from like a pacifist perspective.
Also, guys, Pakistan has like killed activists in America and Canada. Saudi Arabia has killed people, and like not just that guy in the embassy. Like there's this great story. We're talking about the Shah of Iran, right? The CIA goes to him and they're like, dude, there are like hundreds of your agents in our country. Because they're like, he's like, anyone who was against the Shah, he's such a megalomaniac. So they're like, get these fucking guys out of here. And he's like, okay, I will. but every one of your guys has to leave my country. The CIA didn't say shit about that anymore and left. You know, that's how Israel is too. Like we know Israel is fucking like has spies and shit in this country, like monitoring Palestinian families and shit like that. Like, it does happen here. Like these specific extrajudicial assassinations do happen here. You just don't hear about them, and the only way you will is if you're plugged in to movements that these leaders are against that are being supported here. Like that Rushdie, the author, was just like stabbed in the eye, right? Because he's like the Ayatollah says that he like put a death warrant on the guy, right? Because he wrote books. He wrote books that take like Islam and incorporate like fantasy elements and stuff to it.
Okay.
So a lot of people. He's very like he's like a kind of like a Hindu fascist type guy.
Yeah.
A little bit. So there's that whole like Hindu Muslim thing going on there as well. Like he's like there's like books that were even so there's these books the Prophet, right? He originally had these verses in the Quran, and later he took them out, and it's something like he had like something like evil that was still in him that hasn't been cleansed, and he didn't have full clarity of the Quran or something like that.
Right.
So they're called like the lost verses and stuff. So this guy wrote like a fantasy book based off of those lost verses, and it like really pissed off the Ayatollah.
No, I get that. So when I say terrorist, I should be more clear. You know, the United States is a sponsor of a great deal of state terrorism. I would never
state
deny
terrorism,
that.
correct?
It's more a matter of what alternatives do you have. In Afghanistan, no option exists at the moment with the Taliban in charge outside of throwing a bomb and a match in. There's just not really a mechanism for diplomatic engagement. In the US, of course,
their vehicle for diplomatic engagement was 9/11. That's the problem. The same logic that you're applying to our drone strikes, they applied to the attack on America in 9/11.
Who? Afghanistan?
What is he talking about?
Omar was literally trying to get our help. Being like, we don't cut people's heads off anymore. We learned our lesson, America. Please, please help us buy bread. Omar was trying to get Western investment into that country. This is just like how Castro got fucked over by the Cuban Missile Crisis. And it's so funny to make fun of Omar because he's like a horrific war criminal. Him dealing with al-Qaeda, just a total mess in his plans all the time.
They were getting back at us for our terrorism and war country.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily fair to compare a terrorist attack against civilians to a targeted strike on an al-Qaeda official.
Does it really matter what the reason is?
Yes.
50,000 plus civilians end up massacred. Yes. Does it really matter what the? I mean, Vaush, one sec. When you talk about Russia and Ukraine, you always say, well, of course, there's going to be a justification for everything. Of course, Putin is going to justify his invasion of Ukraine somehow. Obviously, no one does these militaristic actions without justification. Well, the only thing that separates our terrorism from al-Qaeda's is that you think they have a better justification. The same thing that you constantly rail against other, geopolitical superpowers for using as excuses for their crimes.
We do. Well, the difference is we do support state terrorism, though. There are there is but you have to understand what state terrorism is and what terrorism is. They're two different things.
Yeah, they're two very different things.
The justification that Putin is using is a pretext for war. In this case, though, whether or not you should kill a person is actually heavily influenced by the legitimacy of any, crime you would try to pin to them, right? I don't think the people in, the towers necessarily did anything wrong, apart from being financiers and New Yorkers. But
Bin Laden justified it with the excuse that because we're a democracy, we all support the leadership equally and we're equally responsible.
Interesting.
Which is bullshit. I mean, Bin Laden was lying.
But the al-Qaeda man, he certainly earned our spite. It's really like a matter of what you can get away with.
He tried really hard.
And what the best option is given the context of that situation. So this is the reason why I was massively against the attack on Soleimani in the Iraqi airport.
Fuck you,
I
dude.
don't like Iran. They do.
Fuck you. All right. Soleimani has personally killed friends of mine. He is horrible. He is just as bad as these people, Bin Laden, if not worse, because he is technically a state terror apparatus. And the other guy that we killed with him was the head of the PMF, right? So he was, both of them were doing those black ops where they would just send people out and just massacre people. That is the literal IRGC, dude. They are responsible even for like this situation in Syria. The Quds Force is Iran's version of the Green Berets. We had been trying to kill Soleimani for a long time, and this just happened to be the time when he was open. And it was a good strike, too. Getting him on the fucking highway by the airport with no collateral. And the reason why you think you're against it is because a majority of Iraq, not even a majority, because the Sunni aren't represented in neither of the Kurds, really, but of the government that is 100% Shia, basically, at this point. Like, you can say, the other ones have seats, shut up. There's only two parties that matter. It's a two-party state, and they're both Shia parties. And half of that party is Iran. That's why you have people in Iraq crying on the street saying that, like, Soleimani has killed way more people. Way more people.
Universal W.
Bro, he's Bin Laden has probably personally killed 0 people. Soleimani definitely has killed people himself. Definitely has tortured people himself, for sure. So did the head of the PMF, for sure.
State sponsored.
And you go watch the Netflix movie Mosul. Very accurate. At one point, they encounter somebody from the IRGC, and they're just like, "Fuck, don't talk to those guys. We hate them." I think it's like Hezbollah. It's Iraq Hezbollah or something. It's one of the best scenes in the movie.
Terrorism. They got some of their folks to shoot missiles at our bases. You know, very cringe, not great. Soleimani, massive piece of shit. But doing so. Iran is a country you can negotiate with. In fact, it's a country we should be.
What about when Trump allowed Soleimani to have Kirkuk? Now both Iraq's oil fields are controlled by Iran.
That's cool.
Do you think that was a good idea? Deceptively gave Kirkuk over to the control of the Iranians and Soleimani. They bought that shit out, and they were given to it by Trump. And then later he killed the guy.
You know, the Obama steps towards the Iran peace deal.
Probably the best thing he ever did.
No, yeah, like huge shit right there, right? Like, I want Iran to be treated as like an honored diplomatic guest. Do I like the country? No. Do I like America? No. You know, what am I, a hypocrite?
No.
Just murking one of their guys in an airport is insane, like fucking wild to me. Because it feels like if you have issues with what Soleimani is doing, and don't get me wrong, he did a lot of bad stuff, there's another avenue. There's always another avenue you can go through. When it comes to Afghanistan,
no, there's not. He's the leader of the Quds Force, dog. You can't just walk up to the guy. They had the only time he was open to be hit is like in those situations where he flies into a country and gets into a convoy, and he's immediately goes into like a secure location after.
Former al-Qaeda leaders, I'm a bit more laissez-faire because it feels like any of the alternate options we have in that context would involve potentially risking greater international trouble. No American leader would ever risk losing a like a member of a SEAL team,
right?
Trying to apprehend someone they could just like annihilate from 8 miles.
Also, like we said in that Iran podcast where she's talking about the nuclear scientists, how come on, they're like isn't nuclear scientists, and it's like she's right, not anymore. They're dead. Like they had like 2 or 3 dead ones. Like the guys, like the one guy who was like totally dependent on the program and had all the notes, like and all that shit. Like he didn't have a predecessor. And that's the thing about Qasem Soleimani. Do you think Iran put multiple people in like Qasem Soleimani was so powerful, he could any day he wanted, he could take over Iran. He could go in, overthrow the Ayatollah, and be in charge of Iran any day he wanted. Probably could do it in Iraq too, any day he wanted, if he just decided to do that.
Yeah, if.
But he was loyal.
To
right?
a fault, apparently.
So he was, and the guy next to the Ayatollah, he could totally knock the Ayatollah out, but he's going to get power anyway, right?
Yeah.
So Qasem Soleimani, like, he has everything that he wants already, and
Well, not anymore.
yeah, but you don't get somebody who's powerful enough to be able to just walk in and say, "I'm in power now" to the Ayatollah.
Yeah.
Right? You don't get another one of those. It's not like ISIS where they replace a leader every week because he gets slap chopped. You know, there's only one Qasem Soleimani, and he's dead.
Also way.
Right.
And it might cause more death to just do that. So it seems like we're kind of trading deaths here.
I mean, I definitely get what you're saying.
petty.
Like, I get the theory behind drone warfare and why, like, you're.
Do you know? Think about how much death is prevented
Through drones.
in the Middle East because of killing Qasem Soleimani, and how much like operational logistics Iran lost there.
Saying that
That's another thing. Is like the civilian ratio with drones has been bad, right? So we got even more careful, except for places like Yemen, and then we kill this guy, and now we're like, how many lives did that drone strike save?
Yeah,
because you're
It's a
getting
good
into like
question.
unlimited potential there.
It's better than
But
the
then people can
alternative.
be like, yeah, but that kid could have grown up to be a doctor who you bombed. Fuck off, shut up.
I definitely understand that.
also
But again,
could have
I
been
think
Hitler.
by like feeding into the post 9/11
Doctors don't come out of Waziristan.
logic
I'm
of just
sorry.
throwing habeas corpus in the trash, I really do think you're feeding into the exact same talking points which led to the atrocities committed at Guantanamo Bay, committed against untold, hundreds of innocent people that were tortured or killed or, killed as collateral damage, again, under this guise of anti-terrorist war on terror activity, which continues to this day.
Wait, can I ask you?
Yeah,
I just because I'm curious, right? So international terrorism is easier now than ever before, right? Like, the way we're all connected. If there were people in Afghanistan, let's some new fucking leader, whatever, he pops up, funds a terrorist attack, directly leads to 17 people dying in France or whatever.
That's where you fucked up.
Who gives a fuck about the French?
No. Because he talked about the funding, right? We can track the funds more than ever before, making terrorism way harder now. That's why, like, the only like Daesh attacks that are successful now are like these random lone wolves that are just like, I have an AK, I'm gonna swear loyalty to Daesh, and then run outside and like kill a bunch of people on the street cafe, right? Like they can't just like do something like 9/11 again, where they like put operatives in that get trained up and stuff.
Never again. It will literally. Well, I shouldn't say this, but I highly doubt it'll ever happen again.
The Obama admin is probably when it was like international terrorism was at its height.
Right.
Like what the next like follow up like al-Qaeda attack was like the shoe bomber, right? And like he didn't account for sweat.
He failed to light the shoe.
Yeah, because he didn't account that his foot would get sweaty.
Dickhead.
People are mad.
Genius,
something has to be done. But dude's somewhere in Afghanistan. He's in a fortress.
Haqqani.
Do you think? And I'm seriously asking. There's like three options, right? You drone strike, easy. You attempt to arrest, potentially very bloody and destructive, but you do get to put them on trial, maybe if they.
No, you're not getting out of there.
Or
if you
third,
try.
you ignore it. Of those three, do you? You side with the arrest?
They also they monitored him, like they clocked him like 6 months ago, right?
Who?
Zahawi, right?
Yeah, okay.
So here's context that you aren't going to get from anywhere else. The UN issued we've talked about this. We have a post on this. If you remember way back when he killed him, we were talking about this a week before he died, me and you, about how the UN issued a report saying that we were misled about how sick he was. He wasn't sick. He wasn't going to die. He was in perfectly good health. Remember that? A week before the strike happened.
Yeah.
The same day that strike was authorized by the President of the United States. So
here, let me tell you, and I want to explain this a little bit, because I think that the conversation we're having is very similar to the conversation surrounding the death penalty. Obviously, I understand why people would say this guy's a complete piece of shit. He deserves to be punished via the death penalty. He doesn't deserve life. I can sympathize with that argument. I can understand why people make that argument in the same way that you're making the argument that you are right now. However, because of the fact that there's even a less than 1% chance of the wrong person, an innocent person, dying as a result of the death penalty, I'm against it in principle. I feel the same way about the drone war and these drone targets. Your hypothetical terrorist who just killed 17 people and will kill again.
The slap chop ones fix that problem.
The drone war ended.
Yes, I understand the context in which people would say, yeah, drone the fucker. It's going to be way easier and less people will die as a result. I understand that.
Democracy Now was a huge help getting the drone war to end, right? The woman who did the Waziristan documentary, she hosts the show sometimes. Like she's one of the co-hosts that will appear on the show.
The difference, though, is that the death penalty is something enacted potentially on a person who's already incarcerated. The alternative to their death is incarceration, meaning they're already under control. failing to deal with a terrorist leader could lead to them killing again, potentially. And you might enact more death in an attempt to arrest them. You could drone strike them and kill 3, or attempt to arrest them by storming a compound, killing 17, including like a SEALs officer.
But that happens via drones anyway. Like I said, 50,000 people plus have died because of the drone war since 9/11. That happens anyway.
Nope, I'm isolating a circumstance. You're talking about, when you say drone warfare have killed 50,000 plus, you're talking about the modern front of weaponry across all conflict zones across a 20-year period. I'm just talking about this specific hypothetical. If you take a look, like my content broadly, overwhelmingly, I tend to be against what we do with drone strikes. I covered extensively that bullshit under the Biden admin following our retreat from Afghanistan, where there was those fucking kids in the...
Yeah, that was bad. That was one of the, like, leaving on Afghanistan by bombing that fucking aid worker. Great job. But that's what happens when you rip all your logistics out of the ground, I guess.
Yeah.
The thing is that these people going on and on about habeas corpus and due process don't say shit about the ISIS camps that were trying to fucking, like...
No, never.
You know, there were so many ISIS fighters whose lives are spared in camps. The camps are full. Nobody is doing shit. Fucking habeas corpus. See, I'm ahead on this shit too. I'm way ahead. I'm so much more anti-war than you.
Against the...
But, like, no wonder they won't negotiate with us then, right, Vaush?
Well, the Taliban and the al-Qaeda officials would never negotiate with.
What are you talking about?
Relax.
I can't. That's just one of the most ignorant fucking things. This is why you shouldn't be covering geopolitics, dude. Oh, I'm sorry. Is that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo standing next to one of the founders of the Taliban, Mullah Baradar? What are they doing together? I bet this is a conspiracy. This is just a guy who looks like him, you know, like that one where they say like John McCain was like with al-Qaeda or something like that back in the day. That weird picture. This totally didn't happen, right? You know,
never.
People don't realize is they think that Joe Biden's withdrawal date had something to do with 9/11. The Doha talks just happened to take place a year before the final withdrawal date, which was the decade of 9/11, or the 20-year anniversary of 9/11. It was just all a coincidence. It had nothing to do with 9/11. They had to leave by that date anyway. It was negotiated by Donald Trump.
And they were like capable
by his
of
admin.
International
He didn't do
negotiation.
shit.
I would probably retract all this. I would be like, yeah, we need to talk with them about
Well,
this.
then that's my question here. If I could just jump in really quickly with, you know, one of the other things that I don't think has been mentioned so far is that we are also systematically starving the country of Afghanistan.
Oh
of a
my
bunch of
God.
resources right now. In your mind, is it complete?
Maybe if Afghanistan was concerned about that, they wouldn't put in a sanctioned government. What's stopping them from ruling a puppet state that they wouldn't have fucking sanctioned leaders in place and they could just rule from the shadows? Nothing's stopping them from doing that. They put a sanctioned government in place because they wanted the glory of victory and power. They're starving their own people.
Completely impossible that if we send over some diplomats to say,
We also pay
we can
them.
negotiate a way of you guys having control of this
We give them a shitload of money.
country again, we give
every
you back
year.
these funds.
Still.
You know, let's you know, that would be the way that's not, you know, let's go in and kill with drones, or let's go put more boots on the ground, right? I'm just wondering why that's not even considered a possibility. And I'm not trying to sound like hippy dippy, whatever, but I'm just saying that if we have something that is leverage, right?
It's like a retard echo chamber.
Entire fortune of the country of Afghanistan and all of its wealth that, you know, is as a result of our holding on to it, is starving all of its people, right? You know, we hold all of those.
I'm so glad this was even dumber than I was expecting.
I don't think that they would come to the negotiation table if we're like, hey, we will give this back, but you know, you kind of have to, you know, in the same way that you said Iran, you know, obviously they do a bunch of fucked up things. They're a terrorist state, but you believe that, you know, they can be negotiated with and therefore they should be. I'm wondering if you think that they're...
How do you think we were able to pull out of Iraq and Afghanistan? We negotiated with individual tribal leaders in Iraq to fight al-Qaeda, right? Like negotiations have 100% gone on between us and al-Qaeda, depending on if our interests align. You know, even before we were pulling out of Afghanistan, the Taliban gave us intelligence on an ISIS base, and we dropped the mother of all bombs on it. We couldn't have done that without the Taliban's help.
That's true.
Everyone fights for their own interest.
They're on our allies.
Negotiated diplomacy between
allied
Afghanistan
interests.
and the United
Yes.
States. That's like, hey, we will give you back all of this money and resources. Your people will stop
They do.
starving. They will love you.
That's how like the sanctions and freezing the money works. That's how it works. That is part of it. You know, if like the Taliban just didn't want to put in a sanctioned government and like he gave women's rights and stuff like that, that money would be unlocked.
Because you are able
That
to
was
be
the
the
deal.
you know, leader that returned
They,
Afghanistan.
believe it or not, the Taliban negotiated and agreed to it because agreeing to it got the Americans out.
table for discussion, right? Like if we're going to be talking about extrajudicial killings, if we're going to be talking about putting troops on the ground, like it just seems absurd to me that we can't look at this obvious potential pathway to, you know, diplomatic kind of agreement that's not going to result in, you know, more deaths. And even so, Vaush, as a caveat to giving them their money back, I think it would make perfect sense for us to say, okay, then you guys are going to, you know, exist under the rule of international law. And if you engage in terrorism, or if one of your citizens engages in international terrorism,
my God,
then you are going to agree to let the, you know,
this is literally in the fucking document, dude. They did this.
International
the fact that
community,
my
you know,
solution is to do what
collect
Trump
that person
did
and prosecute them for their crimes in front of a trial or a jury or whatever.
No, I'm
Trump
fully
had
in favor
the
of
good
that. As a
idea.
concept, I'll always lean towards diplomacy. You know, even with countries like Iran and North Korea or whatever, I still think it's like the right road
because
to take.
Trump's diplomacy with North Korea definitely didn't benefit only North Korea.
No,
with
never.
press conference and that shit. It definitely was beneficial for talks and definitely advanced agendas elsewhere. Yeah, okay, dude.
It's difficult because the Taliban don't operate in good faith. I mean, they're like when we say terrorist state, like we know the U.S. and Israel are terrorist states, but like the Taliban are literally a
Ask the
terrorist
Native Americans
state.
if we negotiate in good faith, though, right?
Oh my
wait,
god.
well, okay.
We did. Like individual tribes, yes, not all. Like, oh my god, there's plenty of that shit. The fucking Native Americans overthrew the colonial empires. You know, the only thing that it's just that the British arrived late and they were able to settle in after disease has ravaged everyone. You know, like, and then it gets like the Trail of Tears. No, there wasn't negotiations there, but like all the time they had to negotiate because the natives would fuck them up. Look up Pontiac's War sometime. All right, it is fucking awesome. A whole bunch of people like unite. It's like right before like basically the colonial project in Britain fails. They all unite under this guy Pontiac, right? And like they just do economic damage on the British to the point where they start having to put in the taxes that they largely say are responsible for the revolution, even though it's not.
That's hilarious.
You know, like that all of the situations, like one of the main reasons why the colonial project failed is because these people killed people. But we also were negotiating trade with them in their own interest at the same time.
Hold on, no, we're not defending American, you know, unilaterally or whatever. But right now, like the Taliban are uninterested in diplomacy.
And like also, like if it wasn't for disease, like there would be a way different America today. It wouldn't have gotten to the point where the Trail of Tears could even happen. Like they would just be too powerful to be pushed like that. And it's not like well, you know, the whole smallpox blanket is a lie. That never happened.
Yeah, I did know that.
I hear it all the fucking time from these
so
types
common.
of people.
Mm.
And also, even if there's like one loose account that it's like, even if they did, that's not how smallpox works.
Yeah.
Even if they were like, hey, these blankets were definitely on smallpox victims, they would be, you know, they don't know enough about disease where they would probably burn those blankets anyway, but they're like, hey, we can sell them. You know, that might have happened, but that's not what would have contracted smallpox. It's actually like Christianity that's largely responsible because the missionaries always want to go to these uninhabited places. And then, you know, like that's why the guy just died on North Sentinel Island a few years ago.
I think that's because we're holding all of their shit hostage, right?
Well, but
no,
like ideologically, there's a disposition there. Now, I think that could be addressed.
It would be a funny idea for North Sentinel Island. Build a big drone face, fly it over the island, become their god.
Yeah, cargo cult them. They probably won't be around much longer.
No, there's only like 12 of them left, isn't there?
So the numbers are real low.
Like you need to establish a liaison with the United States or with the United Nations, and you need to be under like international watch. And if you do those things, then we'll unlock your finances or we'll not sanction you or whatever. Like I think there might be a way through that. Eventually, the Taliban might like grow accustomed to governance and they might chill out a little bit. That would be ideal because there's really only two options, right?
I mean, I was hopeful a year ago as well, but they have shown that no, that is not going to be the case. They, if anything, will collapse soon.
The Taliban,
I mean, it already is collapsed.
Control Afghanistan, or
they don't. That's the thing. Is also the whole thing about them controlling the Afghanistan. I mean, that's kind of inaccurate. That would be like saying that America controlled Afghanistan. You know,
which we already did, and you know, look where that got us, right? So clearly not an operant strategy. It's unfortunate. I don't like working with people like that because, you know, they suck. But we only have.
Also, guys, just so you know, we work with the Taliban to provide them intelligence still on like Daesh targets, things like that. And we've seen the video where they have the whole like it's like a propane tank bomb that they use, and they throw it in through the window and it collapses the whole building. That's how they deal with targets there. Way more deadly to civilians than drone strikes, by the way. Ask the KPF how many civilians they killed. They didn't have the same regulations that even the CIA did. They could just do whatever they wanted. Who was going to stop them?
Have so many options
exactly.
Here. If there was like a rebel group that we could fight, but then even that.
Jesus Christ. There is.
How are we going to take the moral high ground, though, and say you're a terrorist state and we can do whatever if us doing whatever means terrorism and war crimes? Like, I don't see how that gives us any sort of a moral authority over the situation. And largely that's why I'm an anti-interventionist in general. It's because even if there are horrible things going on in X patch of dirt in X part of the country.
It's crazy when like all these rebel groups footage comes out of Afghanistan and they all have NATO weapons.
Our world. Yeah, guess what? We're funding and we
have videos of like helicopters supplying guerrilla in the mountains. Even.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's like one like video where you can see it's pretty good video, but it's shitty enough.
A lot more shit that's just as
like
bad,
probably filmed on a GoPro from
the world.
Type of distance and
what
punched
we're
in.
Funding in Israel and Palestine or table in the first place. And again, just because this one guy, obviously, fuck him, he deserves to die. I'm still not going to celebrate it if it legitimizes a.
There's a lot of opinions you can have on this, but like. I go into these information channels and they're not really talking about the drone strikes. They're using shit like Gitmo. What's the Iraq one? Where the girl's making the gang signs and they're torturing the guy.
Yeah. I know.
ISIS loves to throw that picture up.
That's all my argument is that we obviously were the world hegemon. No one's arguing that. I'm saying that as the world hegemon, we should be a lot more responsible, and we shouldn't be committing war crimes under the guise of anti-terrorism.
No, I don't think it's a war crime to drone strike. But with regards to like
what kinds of specific definitions, and if you want to, and like, look, if you care about war crimes, I'll take you to Syria sometime.
We can do. We're going to do. Whatever we think we can get away with. I think we have a responsibility to rein that in, because I don't think that means what we're going to do is morally right.
That's true.
At the end of the day, like
they did have to rein it in.
The strongest in the world is going to have a lot of say over the behavior and the organization of the countries that fall under its umbrella. And I think that we have to acknowledge that. And as long as we can acknowledge that, we can make decisions within that framework. So when it comes to Afghanistan,
I mean, just think about how stupid that statement is like how like Saudi Arabia, like one of our like famous, or one of probably our most famous client state, right? To say that America has any influence on what they do. The only thing that America is stopping is poor journalists from being dismembered in consulates, because like they had screaming matches with Jake Sullivan, who was like, he's in the Biden admin, screaming till MPS was screaming at him. And like our reporters go over there and they open up questions. And the first thing all the reporters ask is like, hey, why'd you dismember that guy and shove him in a suitcase? Right? So like, that's what's being limited there. And that wouldn't have been really discovered without journalism.
Nobody's going to leave Afghanistan untouched, right? Like, China was making like eyes at Afghanistan before we even removed our troops, with like investment agreements. Everyone wants a piece of every part of the world. So the goal is to make sure
the like Chinese consulate, like main like base that they operate their interest out of at Afghanistan is across the street from the UN mission. One of those is still there.
That whoever has
it's not the UN
right in a militaristic sense, I guess, to take a piece from the world is doing so in the best possible way. As it stands right now, I think we should be pushing forward.
I know this because when Scott was talking about how he first got to Afghanistan and how there's lovely peacocks to cross the street, you had to get full gear. The Chinese consulate was what I looked on Google Maps. I found the exact location that he mentioned. And like, even in that video for like only a few frames, it's a picture I got from Google Maps with a street view because there's like a park right next to it, and I have a bunch of like poorly cut out soldiers in the Master Chief in the background crossing the street, and then there was no peacocks, so I put in peacocks as well when he talked about it. Like the amount of effort I put in on that one little thing that nobody will ever see.
But you'll see it, and that's what matters.
For,
yeah, it was so funny.
Like
I put a lot of
greatest
in that
possible
one.
degree of
because I had more time then.
Direct civic engagement, even with states like Afghanistan controlled by the Taliban. However, as long as they are not willing to work with us under any capacity, if some
Vaush, you have to understand the Taliban have to save face as well. They do work with us. Iran does work with us. They have to save face. They can't openly do it.
Fucking bombs get dropped on their territory, especially when the targets are so deserving. It seems like a relatively innocuous extension of our unlimited hegemony. Now, that doesn't mean you can't criticize the broader process. The drone war and the fact that right now, like, you can just drone strike whoever, right? Like, we can do whatever we want.
You cannot
the fact
just
that
strike for
we have
whoever.
the ability to unleash that kind of power with so little oversight is a problem.
You know how I know you can't just drone strike forever? You were able to. You were even able to bring up specific drone strikes that information warfare has put in your head. Like the only reason you know about Qasem Soleimani dying is because Iran wants you to, right? So if you can come up with specific drone strikes and be against them, you're putting leverage on the United States government. So they cannot just be doing what Obama was doing.
Where people like the al-qeada guy get dropped. I won't work myself up about it too much.
Well, like I said, if a fucking mass rapist pedophile gets the death penalty, I'm not going to shed a tear for him, but that doesn't mean I'm going to legitimize and defend the death penalty as a concept. Are you pro death penalty?
No, I'm not pro death penalty.
So would you celebrate if some like asshole piece of shit received the death penalty and died? Like, are you going to go out here and be like, yo, that was based?
If some asshole piece of shit. Damn, I kind of.
You would say yes.
They could always die during the arrest, which I think is a way bigger deal than the death penalty, is the rate at which police kill people in this country. Way more important than the death penalty. The whole like, what about the death penalty? Ultimate moral argument. Who cares? Like, I'm against it, okay?
Penalty, which is what drone strikes are, just extrajudicially implemented.
No,
but if you're an anarchist, any arrest, any incarceration is an exemplification of the power of the judicial system.
What's something the most irritating about the fact that you're talking about this death penalty, prison abolition, and you haven't once mentioned the camps in northern Syria shows that you just don't actually care or advocate for what you think you do. You just have populist talking points that someone else gave you that you're spouting off. Because these are all arguments for something that was happening 6 years ago.
Yeah.
I know because I helped make them.
Supposed to. But I still celebrate if bad people get arrested, right? As long as we live in a set of unjust systems, I think it's possible to simultaneously celebrate the rare good outcomes while also condemning the broader nature of that system, the rare.
Oh yeah, Tool Druid. Vanguard is winning here, undeniable. I think there's no winners.
Good outcomes.
No, there's no winners in debates.
The broader nature of that system. There are lots of systems that
the best part is that they continually say we should do what we're already doing.
Just defend the killing of this 9/11 mastermind.
No.
You said at the beginning of your video, I believe drone strikes are justifiable in Afghanistan, period. You didn't say in this specific instance and every other instance is, not acceptable. You said broadly it's acceptable to carry out drone strikes in Afghanistan at this point, despite the fact that we've already agreed from their perspective, we're just as bad, if not far worse of a terrorist state than they are, having massacred untold hundreds of thousands more of their people than they ever have here in America. So
I don't think America is just as bad.
Stop. Full stop. The Taliban have killed way more Afghan civilians than the Americans. That is just fucking silly to say. You could go watch an interview with Anis Haqqani, right? And not only does he do a whataboutism, he doesn't say, what about you? You killed our people. No. He says, who trained them to make these bombs in the first place?
Interesting.
That are meaningful. We're not talking about moral high grounds here, only reasonable geopolitical pretext. I think that Afghanistan is a field in which justifications can be made for drone strikes against legitimate targets, because the governance of Afghanistan is completely uncooperative with us. And also basically just waged a war against the
isn't that the justification that was used to go into Afghanistan and Iraq in the first place?
I don't know, not at all. We had to lie about Iraq. We had to lie to the UN. Colin Powell had to deliver a bunch of made up bullshit about.
We didn't have to lie to the UN. We could have just done it without UN approval and did anyway. We just wanted to get it because it would look better for our face. But ultimately, it damaged our face more by lying about all that shit. We already had countries on board ready to invade, and and it was going to happen anyway. So we shouldn't have said all that shit at the UN that we got from tortured people.
Someone. I understand what you're trying to do, but that's not
the same thing. You compared 9/11 to murking an al-qeada guy. I'm just saying we're talking about bad systems but good outcomes.
Well, here can I jump in here, guys, for a second? Because I think that one of the like elephants in the room here, and one of the reasons why I just think that a lot of the things that we are doing in Afghanistan with our drone program, Vaush, are undeniably maintaining the fact that the Taliban.
What drone program in Afghanistan? I can't they said they had surveillance. They have agents there for sure. For sure. Agents on the ground monitoring that house for sure had them.
Yeah.
And what do we mean by agents? Are they like white CIA guys with binoculars? No. That's not what the CIA is. They are going to be Afghans, sometimes Haqqani network themselves, telling us information, telling us what's going on there. We knew he was there for a long time. Bush had a philosophy that if we just put in one democracy, that all the rest will fall. And the Arab Springs showed that that's not the case. Like, just because people want democracy doesn't make it happen. All these people want democracy and freedom, right? And they're making this mistake that people do with Iran, saying like, oh, why don't the people just rise up and overthrow them? One day they'll just get enough motivation to do it. They'll be broken enough to do it. That's like a lot of things, what people justify sanctions and stuff like that. A lot of neocons, that's their argument, is that it will break them down economically. We do sanctions for different reasons.
It's episode 13.
Episode 13, yeah, how to save Afghanistan and then the world. Also deals with how climate change is going to make all of this worse, guys.
So have we, though. That's what I'm saying.
Wait, I know that. Again,
but what about?
I don't care. I don't like America. It's not like a defending America's right. We just have the power to make these decisions. Correct. So we have to trust or decide not to trust. The Taliban, for instance, agreed not to house al-Qaeda leaders in Afghanistan. So technically, the fact that guy was in Afghanistan at all was a violation of agreements that we made with them. I have to ask, because if we could guarantee their good faith negotiation, I would be on board. But
Pew Research Center, international public opinion of the U.S. remains positive. Now, sure, these are all the countries you'd expect, but Malaysia's on here.
Is this the one that James brought up and was like, "Oh, why does Australia hate America?" Is that one?
Yeah, Australia. Yeah, Australia's got Australia does hate America. That's funny as hell.
It's like 50-50.
Yeah, Greece is bad too, but that makes sense. But then again, it's pretty hard to survey countries that are authoritarian led.
Yeah.
This is for Americans themselves? Gee, I wonder what happened around this time, 2003, that made it really start going down. What do you think?
I wonder. 2003. Couldn't have been the invasion of Iraq, could it?
America's reputation, and they're totally being held accountable for it. It's just ways that you don't realize.
But what would you do if
accountable enough?
If the Taliban negotiated with us?
They did.
Got their resources back, lied, broke their agreements, which they've done before.
They did.
And just continued operating as a tyrannical, oppressive. They
do.
Would you risk a full conflict with Afghanistan by sending in troops for an arrest, or would you drone strike the leaders, or would you just let it be because we can't do anything without a full invasion?
Well, I don't think that you can't do anything without a full invasion, and I think that from my own perspective point, I don't support the United States being the world police operation. So if you're asking me what I would personally do, I would say that we need to continue to strengthen an international coalition that's going to find.
We need an annoying ding ding for a subscribe button that pops up.
Yeah, I mean they put it in here every 10 minutes. Bro just said an international coalition.
perform and commit terrorist acts or sponsor terrorist acts guilty. I think that that's the only reasonable solution. I don't think that there's any way to maintain any way to maintain
Why did we
any kind
pump that
of order internationally, and I don't think there's any way to maintain any kind of respectability or fair ground if you're going to have one nation state playing world police. So I think if you're asking me how
like
America, fuck yeah.
That's the thing is George Bush took that where he's like, everyone told me we're the world police. We can just extradite anyone, right? Now it's a big deal. Like if America does an extraordinary rendition, it's a big deal. They kind of can't do them anymore. They kind of do them, but give them to the countries that they're in.
Yeah.
To allow those countries. So
do we just let them?
So police would be, it's still inside those countries' legal systems, even if you act as the arresting officer, right? So it's still technically like a police-like role if you're arresting that same person.
But we're only talking about like what to do about this situation here, right? Look, I'm a revolutionary, at least ideologically. I am. There are plenty of people here in America for whom I have strong words. Okay, I don't want to get TOS'd here by YouTube or whatever, but trust me, okay, I reserve plenty of enmity for the people within our own country with our own systems. But if you were like with the system we have now, if we were dealing with like active terrorist leaders in a country like Afghanistan, now if they were in Iran or something or Saudi Arabia, you would have to negotiate.
No.
Iran and Saudi Arabia are developed, actualized countries that are capable of sitting with us at a table and talking it out. Maybe they don't always act.
Saudi Arabia is a different story, but Saudi Arabia would do if we gave them because the terrorists are trying to overthrow the Saudi regime there. Iran is a state terrorist with the IRGC, much different. And also, Mossad killed al-Qaeda's number 3 in Tehran, not that long ago. Like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. In Tehran, right on the street.
Jesus.
I think they pulled up in motorcycles and shot him. Also, there's that there's the one nuclear scientist that they killed, and they literally had a robot that was deployed on a truck that it was something out of 200 shots fired, 175 connected with the target. It was something like that. It was like an insanely accurate robot gun that just deleted this guy from the planet Earth.
I mean, generally, like I said, I'm an anti-interventionist. But if there's actually someone who is guilty, like we talked about, I do generally think that, if we need to, go in and apprehend him, then that should be the way we do it. And, at least then we're actually facing the potential consequences of our involvement abroad rather than just sending some drone to, kill them and civilians as well. I just don't see how, that situation justifies us doing terrorism.
Civilians would die.
It's not terrorism.
And people to arrest.
See these all the time, like the Bearcat, the Australian thing. What is is it called, the Bearcat?
No, it's called shit. I know the name of it. Give me a second.
But you know what I'm talking about. They have robotic machine guns on the top, right?
Bushmaster.
The Bushmaster. But you know what I'm talking about. They have the robotic machine guns on the top.
Yeah.
The threat acquiring machine guns. That's what they used to kill this nuclear scientist. They got one of those, and you just have the remote mount on the machine gun.
Yeah.
And then it just it's able to, steady itself on the rig, and it was able to fire perfectly at the driver to annihilate.
I agree with you 100%. I agree with you that there are massive drawbacks to having a groundswell of individuals that the U.S. Army just go in there and storm and take whoever terrorists down. But I also think there's massive amounts of problems with the United States drone program as it is, and that's why I think we need to all collectively advocate for a strategy that completely eradicates that drone problem, not one that just says, okay, this is a necessary.
Stop using words like eradicate and what drone program. Drones are now drones are primarily used for surveillance, and besides the Daesh style, which has evolved in Azerbaijan and Ukraine, that's a completely different aspect. But as far as the big ones are those fucking the loitering munitions. Those are the fucking big ones. Those are real fucking devastating.
Evil that we have to live with. It's
which
kind of
we have with just
in a weird sense. And I'm not trying to be too far-fetched here, but it's kind of like capitalism, right? Capitalism is something that it seems like we just have to live with, right? But we all three here know that we don't. We can choose to live another way. We can collectively raise our voices, that we can make changes, and that we can overturn.
You can autonomously organize, localize, and Rhode Island the fuck out of it. But America is not going to just suddenly not be capitalist. That's insane.
Yeah.
overturn this deeply rigid capitalist militaristic system. And I think that the same perspective that we have on that, where we know it's an uphill battle, where we know we're going to have to take small victories, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, persistence, that is the way of the, social and political change in this country, right? But we have to reject the framing that just like we have to reject the framing that the only way forward is under U.S. capitalism, and how can we, ease the suffering of individuals under capitalism? Like, no, we have to imagine a way that is, completely free of suffering and abandons capitalism. I just think you have to do the same thing when it comes to drone policy and U.S. military-industrial complex. You have to envision a better world. Hold on a second, Vaush.
Oh, sorry.
I think you have to envision.
Crazy, would you believe it? We regulated the shit out of the drone policy. Kind of. Not really. I mean, there's nothing stopping Biden from being like, you know what, drones are a good idea. I'm going to start doing.
Yeah.
There's nothing stopping him from doing it, but you know what I mean. Really, it became an ethical dilemma. So how do we make ethical dilemmas for capitalism to make them more ethical? Oh, do we do it through supply chain acts? Oh, do no leftists in this country who claim to be leftists talk about supply chain acts? Oh, crazy. It's almost like they don't care about the people who produce their goods and like the genocide that goes on between the slave labor and cotton and all these things. Weird that you don't want to advocate for that.
Weird.
This is a predominant idea in this generation because we lived through the Iraq War and saw what it did, saw how illegal it was, right? And now, somehow, we elect somebody who they don't want to say is a progressive candidate, but ended all the wars the U.S. is in. I mean, Trump helped, kind of. Like the wars are over. Global war on terror is over. There's a cap at when it ends.
Yeah, a strong ideological commitment, and I do hope, ultimately, that our policy gets shaved down to a point where we're incredibly moderate with our use of these tools. Biden, for example, has been doing so many fewer drone strikes than Obama did.
Right. And we give him credit for that. Yeah.
And so clearly, there are changes we made. Trump did restrict the reporting on the civilian deaths from drones, right? Like there was he restricted.
We still had people on the ground in Yemen get the details
on
when
who
we could.
The targets of the drones were and who was affected. I think it was something like that. I would need to reread it. There are ways to make it better.
He changed how you classify things and like military age males, stuff like that, and like largely made it so the drone program in Yemen was more covert and covered up.
Interesting.
But if the broader policy is a reduction in U.S. military hegemony, a reduction in the poor oversight of our systems we use to kill, I'm fully on board with both.
Also, they always want to talk about Saudi Arabia when they talk about the drones, right? Guys, all the drones were launched out of Djibouti.
Booty.
We didn't launch drones out of Saudi Arabia. We launched them across the sea and sent them over to Yemen.
Points on
very American base in Djibouti.
And
who else has a base in Djibouti?
One of the guys.
China, Italy, Russia, and America.
Everyone, literally everyone. That's Djibouti's thing. It's like, hey, you want a base in our country? Come on, pay me. That's all it is. That's all it functions as a state. Or when they bombed Wagner forces in like the CAR or something. You remember that random strike that Turkey did on? We were like, what? Base Turkey drone strike? I think they launched out of Djibouti there too as well.
It was China's first foreign military base.
They might have launched out of Libya as well. I'm not sure. But either way.
You're almost using it to like excuse or like normalize the war crimes we commit as if they aren't terrorism versus when al-qeada does something or
war crimes or terrorism.
Vaush said what war crimes? Yes, Vaush. Because I could say specific one. Abu Ghraib, the prison I couldn't think of, serious war crime. Everyone was put on trial, but we know for a fact there was higher ups that totally did not get the blame that they deserved, right? Even Australia put a guy on trial for war crimes. Journalists helped get that guy arrested by getting data from people in Afghanistan on the ground. There's that rape of the girl in Iraq. Everyone was put on trial for war crimes there. When war crimes happen, although America does cover up a lot of war crimes, but they make it harder to like report on them and come out about them. But they try to handle it internally. But they obviously cover up all these things. They covered up what's his face's death when the squad killed him. The football player. They
not relevant.
Yeah, it is. We killed our own guy, and the government covered it up in Afghanistan. The football
I didn't even know
player.
about this.
Yeah, he left the NFL, joined the military. He's the guy who wrote a journal about the Iraq war, not Afghanistan. He felt different about Afghanistan, but in Iraq, he wrote this war is fucking illegal, like in his journal, right?
Interesting.
That was a war crime that was like covered up, and it came out and it was like settled civil suit wise. So there's like
interesting,
and then like there's every now and then you get this rape and murder on like a base that happens, and you'll see that they like do a lot of stuff to cover it up and things like that. So, but when they say war crimes, they mean above board.
Yeah.
Sanctioned attacks.
Like, blows something up, it is terrorism, and they don't have the right to strike back, but we do, et cetera, et cetera. And it almost sometimes reminds me of like the people that defend Russia in the Ukraine-Russia war. Look at all this context. They're the dominant force in their region. Look at all the stuff that happened 5 years ago.
Don't have the right to strike back. Famously, Haqqani has never killed any Americans. Famously, the TTP did not shut down NATO convoys going into Afghanistan. Oh, but they don't have the missile capability to like launch into America. If Haqqani wanted to attack the United States, he could tomorrow. Nothing is stopping him from doing a terrorist attack in the United States. Why hasn't he? Because he doesn't care. He wants his section of Afghanistan in the world to be the most powerful crime lord over there, not over here. If he fucks with us on our own soil, the next day we'll fucking slap chop him. That's how it works. He knows this.
Any war crimes here, though? I don't think it's a war crime to take out an al-qeada guy.
I understand that, but that's like 1 in 100 drone strikes. Most of them are not
defending the other. But you don't.
You said we have a justification to do drone strikes in Afghanistan, not just the specific one.
Afghanistan is an area where there might be a pretense.
As somebody who's witnessed like genocide and shit, the whole word war crime being thrown around for like anything America does really irritates
that only means that it's
right. But we're talking about the U.S. military here in the State Department.
I don't even say al-Qaeda are war criminals because they're not. They're terrorists. They kill civilians, but war crimes are completely different. They like have completely a totally different context. They're normally framed around genocide and shit, and just like a complete destruction of humanity.
Yeah, these
if you give them an inch.
Yeah, they're just repeating populist democracy now talking points.
Yeah, but there are systems of power out there that are very, very, very dangerous. I'm only excusing this instance, and I think that Afghanistan's an area where we have less leeway for diplomatic negotiations.
So just to clarify, this is the only drone strike.
Okay. Actions have consequences. The U.S. learned this because of things like Abu Ghraib and stuff. Like, believe it or not, when we originally went into Iraq, it was looking pretty good. Remember, we it's going to be okay. We put the flag on the Saddam and like, we're united. The Americans knocked down the statue. It was great for our propaganda. That attitude existed largely in Iraq. And then we shoot people who are protesting because the Marines are occupying a school. The Abu Ghraib report comes out. Like, all of this happens within a few months. Like, all of this like uncovered of like how unethical America was being in Iraq, and then they kill some guys in Fallujah, and then because of the way that looked, it triggered a response from the Americans, even though the IAA was perfectly justified in killing those guys in Fallujah, and they even denounced what happened to their bodies after they left and provided the video evidence of it. Not that that matters, but it's publicly available.
Interesting.
I have it. I will send it to you if you want. They made an entire documentary where they apologized for what happened to the bodies and then say you have to understand why this happened. Like why these people felt this way, because they knew that they didn't think they were CIA. This is a whole conspiracy where they say, yeah, they think they were CIA, but they were just simple contractors, blah, blah. They understood because, not BlackRock, what is it? You find out at the end of the day, and
Blackwater.
Blackwater. This was proved, that's because Blackwater Bridge incident, proved in court that Blackwater was at fault for those guys' deaths, even though we have footage of them being shot with grenades thrown into the car by the IAI that they provided, right? And so the reason why they provided it is because they were accused of war crimes, right? And they're showing this was not a war crime. We hung a guy for this, right? We put a guy on trial saying he planned this whole thing to desecrate these bodies. And then later on down the road, the wives of the contract, and by the way, there was only 2 armed contractors. The other guys were like, they helped build the kitchens and stuff. They were just like restaurant like contractors. They weren't like reported that they didn't have armor. An IED on a road had caused a diversion, so they turned down into like the most militant headquartered street. Right? They made a wrong turn because they weren't even provided with maps. And they didn't have armor. They didn't have access to the vehicles that they needed to do this type of operation. So they proved that these these contractors and that company was at fault for those guys' deaths, that they should have had the intelligence not to take a wrong turn in Fallujah.
Interesting.
And then also, the IA commits an actual war crime. A helicopter crashes, and like this is on camera, it happens, and a helicopter crashes. There's survivors. They kill the survivors, right?
Interesting.
They apologized for it. The leadership apologized for it and held the people who did that accountable. This is how different the insurgencies are compared to like Iraq and then Afghanistan, all this stuff. Like, these people had every right to fight back against the Americans after the war crimes that were committed. And they fought back because of those war crimes, specifically in Iraq. And it wasn't because of like drone strikes and shit like that.
No.
That you're okay with happening in Afghanistan?
There are a few. This is just one of the rare, because like overwhelmingly,
even though those drone strikes likely killed civilians, you're still okay with that?
No, I agree with the ones that don't kill civilians. I generally agree with them after the fact.
Well, that's like saying I'm pro-war only when it's good. Like, you have to be either.
Yes.
No, you're completely on board with that one.
Everyone is. That's how everyone.
I generally think that an anti-interventionist approach is better, and that we should try to avoid war at all, no matter what. That we should always seek a diplomatic.
9/11 caused a war. Therefore, preventing a future 9/11 would prevent a war. I'm more anti-war than you.
Response. And if any civilians have any chance of dying, then we just create the possibility of becoming just as bad of terrorists as the terrorists were fighting.
No,
like World War II. Like, were we doing the Holocaust?
You know what I'm talking about.
Well, no, wait. Well,
so like, as far as sure, we may have not have done the Holocaust, but not everyone, but like you'll hear people say the firebombing in Tokyo was bad. You'll hear people say the atom bomb was bad. The Berlin bombing was bad. They reduced like.
Well, you can't shy away from the counterexample when your argument is rejection of counterexamples. World War II was an example where, we did do a bit of trolling on Normandy, and I think it was pretty okay. I'm okay with our invention. Now, we did fucked up things during World War II. Don't get me wrong, right? Japanese internment camps being a big one domestically across the sea. We fucking bombed Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
If we were talking about like a morally consistent, morally authoritative government, then I would agree with you, Vaush. However, how many wars have happened since World War II, and how many of them were justified? 0 of them were justified that were carried out by the U.S. Absolutely 0. You have to go back to the 40s to find a war that the U.S. has participated in that was even remotely.
I don't necessarily think the Afghanistan war was unjustified. There's just a whole Pakistan factor that's ignored there. You know, like after 9/11, you should expect America to be coming into, like, they just wanted Bin Laden, and it could have been avoided. Iraq is unjustified, but like there's other things like it technically wasn't our war, but like helping the people fight against Daesh, right? There's Serbia. We prevented a genocide. Kosovo prevented a genocide. So no, Vietnam was fucked up.
Moral. We're talking about a literal terrorist government here that indiscriminately massacres civilians under the guise, as you always talk about, Russia has an excuse. Obviously, they're going to have a justification for invading Ukraine. Obviously, every superpower is always going to have a justification or excuse for whatever they're doing. Why do you not see that as being the case here?
Well, would you say that as an argument against invading Germany in World War II? Because you would be afraid of giving the racist...
Here's a question. We can probably say for sure that Russia has weaponized nerve agents. We know we have them individually for assassinations, but in Syria, right, sarin came out of a Russian-made bomb, right? So either Assad made it themselves and they were able to put in that bomb, or that was a Russian bomb with Russian nerve agent that was dropped in Khan Shaykhun, right? So if we assume that Russia has nerve agent, why haven't they used it? Right? Does Russia also face consequences even though they kill a lot of civilians? Guys, do me a favor. Look up the arrest of Abu Zubaydah. That's what you're arguing for. Look up how that went.
Even in the death penalty, the choice not to engage in the death penalty means that they live and that they're contained in the prison. Whereas the choice not to drone strike could potentially mean they die anyway. It could mean they get away entirely. It's a lot more ambiguous because you're not making the decision after they've been incarcerated. It's a little more up in the air. We do the same thing with criminals, right? Like, cops will chase criminals, and maybe a cop fires, and maybe the criminal wasn't immediately a threat to the cop, but sometimes
you also don't arrest other people's countries. Like, rendition is specifically different, but like the Taliban fighters that we had to release as part of the Doha talk negotiations, you hold prisoners of war for leverage. It's always about leverage.
Yeah.
You actually want to capture whenever possible because it gives you more leverage for negotiations.
Mm-hmm.
Laden, or like he's not being captured for leverage. If we captured Suhaili, it was not for leverage.
On a principle basis, because if you do so, is it wrong for cops to shoot people who are unarmed? Overwhelmingly, I agree. But are people who are unarmed entirely lacking in lethal threat to others? No, they're not. There could be a gun on the ground. I like to evaluate stuff based on a case-by-case basis, one in which I'm overwhelmingly against the hegemonic solution. But every once in a while, you have World War II, you have a al-qeada 9/11 terrorist guy, and you have a person who's unarmed but is like seconds away from. It's possible that they were right about to menace, threaten a civilian. They might have had a weapon on them that a cop saw earlier. So the policy I disagree with, just like both of you. I disagree with our drone policy. I disagree with our attitude towards war.
What drone policy?
But even in policies that I disagree with, there are always going to be individual instances of things that I think in the specific context of the situation worked out okay.
Yeah,
and
well, I mean,
I believe that about lots of bad systems.
Sure,
I have to. I'm an anarchist.
I understand that, Vaush. And again, the only thing I just...
By the way, Vaush, anarchist man, doing apologia for Qasem Soleimani, morally, it is more abhorrent to do apology for Qasem Soleimani than it is to do the shit that Hassan does with the Butcha denialism and the Uyghur genocide, like denialism type stuff, right? Because you're directly it would like Hassan is not denying that the genocide happened, right? And if you asked him about Butcha, he would admit that it happened, but he just doesn't understand the information he gives about how Boris Johnson fucked up the talks. It comes from a whole statement that he was making about the Butcha massacre. It's all subtle denialism. You're doing direct denialism of a man who has committed genocides.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's being slow because it's taking a month. We got to finish soon.
What he said.
We've got to also with Qasem Soleimani, right? If we want to talk about destabilizing states, right? It's not like Syria is responsible for its own shit at this point. Syria's in the condition it is, not yes, because of Russia, but because of Assad, right? Iraq is in the position it's in today, not because of America, but because of Iran. And it also, if we want to go back to when we sold weapons to both sides and stuff like that, right? Lebanon is in the position it is because of Iran. Iran is doing so much harm to all these countries in the Middle East through their regional power, because it's a hegemony. It's a hegemony over a specific
regional
area.
hegemony.
Yeah, it's a regional hegemony. I mean, Saudi Arabia has probably the most powerful influence in the area, but they can't do strikes into other countries like Iran can. Iran can hit anyone in the Middle East anywhere, right? They're all over the place. They have an insurgent web all through the fucking place.
Disagree with is just that in principle, I have to come out against the system as a whole, a system which leads to the deaths of estimates say 9 out of 10 targets, being civilian. Obviously, we know that thanks to the whistleblower Daniel Hale, who's currently in prison for telling the truth about our drone program. Again, if we were a moral government, if we were a government that was consistent when it came to picking and choosing our battles, then I might agree, theoretically. But that's not the case. We're dealing with a government that, as I said, has since World War II only engaged in unethical and immoral and illegal wars. I mean, you're talking about mines yesterday and how horrific they are. There's another example of the terrorism we've wrought all over the world. I don't think that justifies other, countries drone striking our leaders. So just as a principle,
inshallah.
Bro, you know how bad Iran has made. So there's this amazing video. I'll try and find it after this to close on. There's an amazing video that Iran made. It's a mock-up of their assassination of Trump. It's so funny.
Every once in a while, there's a World War II. That's all I'm saying. Well, and I would never. And if people back in 1939 were we can't invade Germany. America is a white supremacist nation that has historically used its power to colonize.
There were people like that though until Pearl Harbor happened.
Is the Philippines and do horrible things in Latin America and Panama and so on and so on.
Sure.
And I would say
Philippines also. Well, it was horrific what we did there. It's a bad example because it was the first time we were doing shit that was so fucked up that our soldiers were going against command. That's how fucked up it was.
I
think World War
agree.
II was bad, Vaush. I think everyone agrees that the
Overwhelmingly.
Hitler and the Nazis were bad. That's
I know you think that. I'm just saying I would be like, listen, Teddy Roosevelt fucked up Latin America. We fucked up Panama. We've done horrible shit. But just this time,
yeah,
I think we've got a good one.
Yeah, and
I think we finally found
and that's
it.
been the justification for hundreds and hundreds of thousands and millions of people dead all around the world as a direct result of the enrichment of the weapons manufacturers and defense contractors. Of course, there's going to be a justification.
You would have invaded Germany.
Again, we can go back to World War II.
But there we go. That's it. Yes, people will lie. They will misrepresent information. They will try to sell you on every war, every drone strike. But just because they lie all the time, just because our government lies all the time, which it does, doesn't mean that every once in a while there isn't just through sheer.
Okay, well, I think that's
outcomes,
a good. I think instead of
a good outcome,
instead of running in circles, Vaush, I think that we can agree to disagree and agree that well, no, that's what I'm saying.
No, that's not what you're saying.
And we can agree that every once in a while, even within a very unjust and unethical system, yes, every once in a while, there is an example you can point to as the United States government and the State Department loves to, that yes, every once in a while, something is justified.
Even a drone strike.
Right. And I'm not denying that. I'm not in the interest of denying reality. I'm just saying that that's what a principle is. Even if every once in a while you can find an exemption or something that goes against the principle, you still generally uphold the principle. Again, same with the death penalty, as I keep going back to. But again, we don't have to keep running in circles
Apples
and talking about fucking the Nazis. I don't really see how that's productive.
I love talking about the Nazis.
I know.
No, I fully agree with what you're saying. And if I had the chance to, if I could snap my fingers, do away with our entire policy with regards to drone intervention, including in Afghanistan. This is only as long as we have the bad system, one in every 1,000 outcomes will be acceptable to me. Same way I feel about a lot of bad systems. I don't like capitalism, but they make.
This is my fucking issue with these fucking. This is exactly why I went to Syria in the first place, because I can't fucking stand these people. They advocate all day. They end up just being like information torrents for like Russian disinformation and shit like that. Like when I started communicating as a teenager with Iraqi insurgent groups, I was in anti-war movements, right? And I showed these people that the insurgents were trying to communicate. Like they were making compelling arguments about freedom of the press and freedom of speech and how America is denying them that, right? From like being able to like run their news blogs and shit. And I took this to like leaders of movements. None of them cared. And, it's only in hindsight that I see all these people suddenly like connected to different information warfare networks that I realized they were full of shit the whole time. Antiwar.com, full of shit. I think he might just be dumb enough to believe it, though. You know how libertarians are.
Are you talking about the antiwar.com guy?
Yeah.
He's a straight up Russian shill.
Does he actually get paid by them?
I wouldn't be surprised. Considering he was at that March Against the War Machine thing, it wouldn't surprise me at all. It also wouldn't surprise me if that entire thing was funded by Russia. Because all these anti-war
make good video games now and again, whatever. You roll
Russian
the dice,
flags being waved.
But if
turns out a lot of the Iraq War protests were kind of the same. People thought they were showing up to be against the Iraq War, but it wasn't.
It was for it.
I mean, not really. It was just to be like erode America's like place in the world,
Right.
And also Iraq,
right. Yeah,
most protested war in history. Don't forget it.
Yeah. Did you see that there's a thing happening in Cop City that's one of the connected groups is Code Pink?
Doesn't surprise me. These people attach themselves to movements all the time, and also it benefits the state to have them attached to these movements because it discredits movements.
Yeah.
The 1 in 1,000 good and the 999 out of 1,000 bad, I would, and I think you both would too. And I mean, we agree on that.
I think that that's a good place to wrap this discussion. I thought this was a lot more fruitful than and good faith in discussing. Obviously, we were I won't lie, Vaush. I was a little terrified coming into the Vaush's den. I thought this was
to talk with you in the future too.
That's what I'm saying. I think that we've established a good rapport here, and I would be more than interested in chatting.
If I made James watch this, he'd lose his fucking mind.
I like having nuanced discussions.
Like he's like a neocon.
So. Gasket. So thank you for having us on, and thank you for chatting with us.
Yeah. But the Iran video is 2 minutes and it is hilarious.
Okay.
This better be the whole video, not like. All right, so can we talk about what's on this drone operator's screen? Sideways audio waves, right? With like an air box over it. You can see there's like Windows icons down here, and then the
temple of some kind.
That's the Palestinian. It's like the third holiest site in Islam. It's al-Aqsa.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Now, this entire piece of paper, right? It has the cutoff on the top from like how you would have the page above, right? Like, why is that there? And also, why would you print this out where it's just like it just says, "Hey, kill Donald Trump, avenge Qasem Soleimani," or something like that? Like, dude, like, why would you? This is inefficient, you know?
It's all for dramatic points.
Oh, see, hacking. Oh, these aren't even audio waves. I see. Now that it's close enough, you can see that it's matrix code. Soleimani's murderer, and the one who gave the order will pay the price, right? Oh, and they hacked all their phones to send this message? Badass, dude. Now, why do they have a machine gun and a beast of Kandahar?
I have no idea.
Part. The like drone operator has like a fucking picture of the two guys that were killed. Definitely put in their own music. It's definitely not the original music here.
Awful water rendering.
See, it's looping it. This is what I wanted right here. So the drone operator, beforehand, he pulls up a picture of Qasem Soleimani on the monitor before doing it as well, which is so fucking funny. Oh, they hacked the camera, so it's on a loop now that it can't see. Okay. This is actually pretty good. Probably stole it from like actual surveillance stuff.
Yeah.
He's taken that golf swing like 100 times now. And also, how many times has the shadow of like the Beast of Kandahar rip-off drone been above it? You know, I assume this is not the original. Like they edited it,
surely,
and it was looped but I lost it the first time I saw that, and fucking he pulls up Qasem Soleimani's picture before drone strike. You know,
that's good.